You have no idea how excited I am to talk about the books I read this year. Let's get into it. Hey there, guys. So today's video is going to be all the books that I read in the year of 2023. I ended up reading a total of 15 books in 2023. And honestly, I'm pretty proud of myself that I even hit past 10 books because my goal this year was to try and read at least a book a month, and I failed at that pretty badly up until October. And then I finally was able to finish one book in October, and I finally had finished the book that I started back in like April, finally in like the month of September. And then I went and decided to pick up some more books to see if I could read them faster. But the majority of the books that I'm going to be talking about um, were read in the months of November and December. So basically, all the books that I read in the last 2 months of the year basically made up for all the books that I didn't read every month in 2023. So I read so many books in December. I read one book in October. I was like, let me see if I can try and meet my one book a month goal. So I finally did that in October and I read one book. And then in November, I was like, let me see if I can read more than one book. And I ended up reading 3 books, which was already a huge accomplishment for me. I was like, okay, maybe I can start reading 3 books a month. And then in December, I read 10 books. 10 books. For me, that's crazy. I'm pretty sure it was 10 or possibly 11. So let me just count really quick. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Or I guess it was 9 books actually. Yeah, I read 9 books in December. Why did I think it was 10? But I'm pretty sure that's accurate. But yeah, the other 2 stacks of books that I'm going to talk about is all from December. Most of the books that I read were in December, which is just crazy to me. So I just didn't think I would even be capable of getting back into reading so passionately because I have ADD. I've been struggling with reading my whole life. I wasn't really a big reader growing up, but I'm just so happy that I've gotten back into books or gotten into books for the first time in my life because the only 2 series I really read was Harry Potter. Harry Potter did get me into reading books. But the only reason why I read them was because my whole family was reading them at the time that they were all coming out. Like Harry Potter was a global phenomenon and everybody was reading it. So I didn't want to feel left out with my family. And my mom was saying you really should read them. And like it was a struggle for me because I was a very slow reader. And now I'm reading books in like 3 days. The most time it'll take me to read a book is 3 days, and now I'm even getting faster at reading longer books that are over 300 pages than I'm reading in 4 days. So it's like for me, that's huge. So I just wanted to start with that before we start getting into talking about all the books that I read. But I just wanted to say that I'm just so happy that I decided to get back into reading again because now it's all I want to do when I'm not doing my makeup, when I'm not filming, when I'm not working, when I'm not out with my friends, when I'm not seeing my boyfriend, all I want to do at home is read. So, and I've been reading a shit ton. So let's start off with the book that started it all. And I still think that this was my favorite book that I read last year. Not just because it was the first book that I finished, because like that's not really a reason why something's your favorite book. That's like more so like what sparked my love for reading again. But I still think this was my favorite book I read this year and probably one of my favorite books ever. And the first book that I decided to start with was The Radleys by Matt Haig. I absolutely loved this book, you guys. This is what got me into Matt Haig, and I'm gonna do my makeup in a minute. I just wanted to start off by talking about it really quick. Um, my mom actually gave me this book, and she was like, I feel like you would probably be really interested in this book. And she gave it to me like years ago. And my mom doesn't even remember how it went or how the story went, but I would classify this book as a dark comedy fantasy novel. And like, not fantasy in the sense of like magic, but this is about a family of vampires. And the reason why I loved this book so much is because I just loved the concept, because each chapter actually switched between the four characters' perspectives of the family of vampires. So we had a mom, we had the dad, we had a son, and we had a daughter. And what happens in this book that ends up sending everything into a spiral? Well, first off, they're actually a vampire family of vegetarians. They try and this would make a great Netflix show. I feel like it would be similar to like Clarita Diet. This would make an incredible TV show. I wouldn't say it should be a movie. This would be a hilarious TV show. So like some books you can just see clearly as a movie, and then some books you can see as a TV show, and I feel like this one would be perfect. But basically the daughter the daughter and the son don't know that they're vampires, and basically she ends up murdering this one boy that's a high school bully. And basically when that happens, all the events and discoveries of them being vampires basically unfold. And that's basically what the story is about. I don't really want to give spoilers in this video. I just wanted to give an overview about what the books are about. I don't really want to spoil too much in these videos, and also like if I talk about them for too long, it's just going to be too long of a video. But I just wanted to say I absolutely loved it. And this was definitely my favorite Matt Haig book as well. So I would definitely rate this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I just loved it so much. So that was the first book I decided to read. It took me 5 months to read this though. So this might be the only book that I might decide to go back to reread, because I want to see if I can read it a little bit faster. And also like I want to refresh my memory on everything that happens in this book. And also the mother no the father ends up inviting their his brother-in-law, which is it's her brother-in-law, which is his brother, and he is just like a notorious vampire. He's basically like a criminal. He will like suck anybody's blood. He doesn't have any morals, and he basically has to come into the picture to save the family from any suspects, for them being suspects for her murdering the high school bully, and to cover for the daughter so she doesn't get punished in going to juvenile prison. So, and then everything unfolds after he gets there. There's just so much that happens in this book that like I cannot even describe how good it was. And I started crying, I think, at the end when one of the characters dies. That's how much this book impacted me, and I thought it was incredible. Just such a good read. I loved this book. There's definitely a top 5 in this book, and in this video, and that's definitely one of them. I loved that book so much. Okay, then next up, I really wanted to read another Matt Haig book, because I'm like, since I loved that book so much, I wanted to see what his most popular book was. And this book was a really popular book. I think it sold like 6 million copies, which is insane. So I was like, okay, let me give this one a go. So the second book I decided to read was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, or Matt Haig. I can't remember how to say his name. This book was amazing as well. I can see why this book was so hyped and why this book is uh his most popular book. It basically takes place with this girl that is working in a record store, and basically she really just doesn't like her life too much. She wanted to end her life pretty much. And basically the book gives her a bunch of chances to live the perfect life, basically is what it's about in a nutshell. And the way that she does this is through like a library, like in a magical library that's actually in her mind, because this all takes place a few minutes before midnight because she wants to end her life by that midnight, because she actually gets fired from the record store and goes back to her apartment and is like freaking out that she's not going to be able to make money, that like what's the point of being alive anymore when she doesn't even have a job and she thinks she's pretty much a failure. And basically with the access to having the Midnight Library, first off, you don't know if this is all was just a one big dream, because you're not really sure, but I kind of feel like it probably was, because during this whole course of this book, it basically takes place a few minutes before midnight. But there's so much that happens in this book that it's like, it's so beautifully written and such a good balance of telling her story and how all the characters that she meets in the different lives that she lives. And basically her guide through this whole thing is one of her like childhood librarians in her elementary school, is guiding her through her different lives. And the way that she lives them is that she has to open another book, and she basically is able to jump right into the life that she decides that she wants to live. But honestly, there's really no definition of a perfect life. And that's basically his overall message in this book, because even if she finds a life that she thinks that she's happy in, she sometimes will find some sort of flaw about it, that or she thinks that she doesn't deserve this type of life because she feels like she hasn't really lived it, because as soon as she jumps into the life that she decides to live, she doesn't know anything about the life except for what's going on in the present moment. Like if she decides to live with like the love of her life and they have a kid, she doesn't know how they fell in love. She doesn't know how they ended up having a child. Like she has no memory of that. So actually that's kind of like a big uh I wouldn't say flaw. Um that's like not a way to live a perfect life. So it was just so good, and I absolutely loved this book as well. And I cried at the end of this book too, because the way that he writes about just, basically saying that there's no perfect life. But also, I felt that this book really related to Matt Haig because, he's written about depression before. He was depressed himself, and I really, really want to read more of his books. But after I read these two books, I really wanted to jump into some other authors. But honestly, if it were up to me, I probably would have just continued to read a lot of his books because they were just so fabulous. But I would definitely give this book a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I absolutely loved it. I ate up every moment of this book, and it was just so good. So that's what it was basically about. So that's not really giving any spoilers away, is that basically you can't find the perfect life. You just have to take the obstacles that are thrown at you in life. And I loved it so much. It was so good. Okay. So then after I read Matt Haig, I wanted to get into some other authors this year. And I was like, you know what? I really want to take my shot at reading a romance because honestly, I am interested in romance novels and I wanted to read at least one to see how I felt about it. So the first one I decided to start out with was Love in Other Words by Christina Loren. And the reason why I decided to start with this one was because I watch Batty Beans Get Ready With Me's a lot on the books that she recommends that she reads in 1 month. She usually comes back and does like a reading wrap-up video of all the books that she's read. And she mentioned that book not just in her like favorite books that she read, but also she said it was one of her favorite, well, not in just her reading wrap-up, but she said it was one of her favorite books that she ever read in the entire year because basically she's the one that inspired me just to get back into reading again in the first place. I'm like, you know what? I feel like I need to start reading again, and I kind of wanted to get into some of the authors that she was recommending. So that's why I decided to read that book. And that book actually only took me like 3 days to finish. And once I finished that book in 3 days, I'm like, I can read anything at this point. I was so happy with myself that I finished it in 3 days. And again, I absolutely loved this book. Christina Loren they are such incredible romance writers. And basically this book is about, what's her name? I believe her name is Macy. Macy Sorensen has like a childhood love, but she's actually, in the present, she's actually engaged to another man that she thinks that she's happy with, but at one point she's a nurse in a hospital, or I don't know if it's a nurse, but I know she works in a hospital. Maybe she is some type of doctor, I can't remember. And basically she ends up running into her childhood love in the hospital because I think he's visiting like one of his friends, like bringing like a get well soon to him, like something like that. I can't remember specifically if that was why, but after she ends up running into him, she thinks that she's still in love with him. And basically when they were teenagers, something traumatic happens in their past that makes them she doesn't ever want to talk to him again. So she hadn't talked to him in like 12 years, and basically the book goes back and forth in each chapter of their past to their present, like them, falling in love with each other when they were young. Basically, he was her whole world and he was hers when they were growing up, but then basically something happens that makes them not ever really want to talk to each other again. And also something traumatic happens to one of her family members, and he doesn't know that this happened because they haven't talked. And then she finally tells him the story, and then basically throughout the novel you find out whether or not they're going to end up together, or if she's going to stay engaged to the man that she's already engaged to. So it was just such a good book. I definitely would rate this book again a 5 out of 5 stars. I completely fell in love with this book. I loved it so much. I didn't cry during this one though, which I was actually surprised because I ended up shedding tears in a lot of the other books that I'm going to talk about, but this one I didn't end up getting upset. I don't know why. It was just such a beautiful book that I was just so invested in the story, and when it actually happened, I just kind of felt numb when I was reading it because it was really sad, but it was just so good. I absolutely loved it. So definitely would recommend that book if you want to get into Christina Loren. Okay, and then the other 2 books I'm just going to talk about in tandem together because they're obviously a series. And I really wanted to go into a fantasy series at this point. I'm like, fantasy is still my favorite genre to read. I really want to read another fantasy series. So the reason why I started with these ones first is because there's only 2 books out so far. Like, these just came out like this past year and took the internet by storm. And I'm talking about the Fourth Wing series, and I read both of these books in November. So obviously I read Fourth Wing first, and then Iron Flame I read second. I'm not going to go too much into these books because I have full Get Ready With Me's talking about both of these, and I want to rate these really quick because I don't want to pick them back up again. I would rate the first one 5 out of 5 stars. The second one I would rate a 4.5 out of 5. I still absolutely loved Losing Myself in Rebecca Yarros's world. They were really thrilling, really, really fun books to read. I thought they were great. I think that she's a hilarious writer as well. I actually think she's really funny. But I know a lot of people love to hate the Fourth Wing series. I personally love it. So basically, I'm just going to give a quick overview because, again, if you really want to see my thoughts about both of the books, you can just type in my Get Ready With Me's with Fourth Wing, talking all about Fourth Wing and talking all about Iron Flame, because I had to talk about both of these books because there was so much information in them. But I'm just warning you that that does contain heavy spoilers because I talk about the books in completion. So I would recommend only watching those videos if you have read both of the books yourself and you want to know my opinion. But basically, it's about a girl named Violet Sorrengail, and she is supposed to be destined to be a scribe. Her mother and her sister and her father all think that she is going to become a scribe, but then she actually ends up becoming a dragon rider, and pretty much the whole premise of the book takes place in a dragon school, and basically you are supposed to bond with your dragon, and if you're destined to become a dragon rider, you're supposed to bond with your dragon or die. And basically that's the whole concept of both of the books. The second book kind of goes into her second year, because obviously you pretty much know the main character isn't gonna get killed in her first year, but it's not really giving away any spoilers. If you read the synopsis for the second book, it pretty much says that on the back of the book that, Violet Sorrengail is now entering her second year at blah blah blah. So it's not really giving anything away. But I just have to say, I absolutely loved it. So that's basically what it's about. I don't really want to give any other details. I was just really, really into this world, and the fact that, basically, they're all so desensitized by dying that they will do anything to bond with the dragon, because that's basically, the only thing that they can do, or they will die trying. So it's just such a good world. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And I'm not sure if the third book is coming out this year, but after I'm off of my book ban and whenever her third book comes out, I'm 100,000% buying it, because I have to see what happens in the third book. I'll just say, in the first book, the way that book ends, probably one of the best endings I've ever read. But it was mind-blowing. I was like, what? And I did cry a couple of times in Fourth Wing. I didn't cry in Iron Flame because honestly there wasn't really as significant of a death that happened in Iron Flame as it did in Fourth Wing, because you always know in a fantasy series one character that is important is bound to die. That's usually how it works. It's not even formulaic at this point. You just expect it, because it kind of makes the story much better if a certain character dies. But the character that dies in the first book just really got me because they care about Violet like so much, and it was just so sad. I was bawling my eyes out. It was just so sad. But in Iron Flame, you don't really care too much about the character that dies because you kind of figured that she was gonna kill her anyway. But yeah, absolutely loved Fourth Wing. I'm a Fourth Winger. I love the series and I cannot wait to see what happens next. So now I'm just going to put on get my sponge and then we'll talk about the rest of the books I read. I think there's another 10. So we talked about 5 so far. Okay, so then after I read the Fourth Wing series, I really wanted to read another Christina Loren book, and also I find myself if I'm like in between like trying to decide what to read, I decide to go to a romance novel because I feel like a romance novel is like a good grounding kind of novel to like calm me down a little bit about the worlds that I just read if they're like a little bit sad or if they're like a lot of information or something like that. I'm like, let me pick up a romance book to like, because romance books, like, you're like, you kind of know what happens, and there's kind of like a comfort in reading romance books for me at this point. So the second Christina Loren book I decided to read was The Honeymooners, and this is actually her most popular book. This one was also a New York Times bestseller, but this is their biggest, most popular book. And it's actually going to be made into a movie. So I'm really excited to see it finally, but I'm surprised that I've read so many books that might potentially be movies, or I could see as a TV show. But I also absolutely love this book as well. It was basically an enemies to lovers book, but in like the best kind of way. Some people are like a bit upset about why did they become lovers. They just all of a sudden stopped hating each other, but it's not like they didn't know each other for a long time. Like he was her brother-in-law because he was married to her sister. And so basically what happens in this book is that her sister is supposed to get married, and her sister has always like cut corners into, you know, getting the best deal for things, and basically her sister is the lucky one and she's the unlucky one. And they're twin sisters. I don't know if I said that already. And basically the night of the wedding, after everyone decides to order and eat from the fish buffet that she won in a sweepstakes, her and her best man, which is the two that end up falling in love with each other, they're the only two that decide to not eat from the fish buffet because she actually has a serious shellfish allergy, so she can't have that kind of fish, and he doesn't eat from buffets. He thinks they're like full of germs, and they're the only two that night that don't get sick because everyone ends up getting food poisoning from the shellfish and the fish that they ate at the wedding reception. And basically, her sister won this full honeymoon to Maui that she now can't use because obviously her and her new husband are sick, that they end up not going, that she says that her sister needs to go in her place along with the best man because it's a non-refundable trip. And basically the whole rest of the book is about them trying to get along but also try and play a married couple in Maui. And I just absolutely loved this book. I thought it was hilarious, and I just thought it was just such a cute story. Like, it didn't make me cry. It wasn't like too investing. It was just, you know, a cute little read, and I absolutely loved it. So, let me just finish doing my foundation, and then we can move on to the next books, which I'm not going to go too much into either, because I have a full get ready with me on those too. But again, I would definitely rate this book a 5 out of 5. I absolutely ate this book up. I read it so fast. I read it again in like 3 days. So I picked up this book along with the second book I'm about to talk about. So usually what I'll do is I'll pick up 2 books at the same time, because I think that 2 books is good to start with, because it doesn't overwhelm me too much. I'm like, let me just see if I can finish 2 books before I move on to another one. But typically I'll just pick up 2 books at a time, and I'll end up reading them in like a week's time anyway. But also, like, I just don't want to overwhelm myself. So I'm like, I think 2 books is enough. So the next book I decided to pick up at the same time as The Unhoneymooners. And then once I got like 50 pages into this book, I decided to pick up the sequel as well. I wanted to get into probably the most hated author that I'm going to talk about in this video. But this was the most popular book for the past like couple of years that I was like, I really wanted to see what all the hype was about. So I decided to pick up Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us. Don't come for me when I say that I actually really loved this book. And then after I finished this book, I had to pick up the sequel as well. So I did pick up both It Starts With Us and It Ends With Us. And I actually really loved both of these books quite a lot. I can definitely tell the quality is better on this book than it is on this book, because this book is like a heavy paperback. I mean, it's one of the biggest books in the past couple of years. It Starts With Us was not as popular as It Ends With Us, but I thought that these were both really, really well written books. Again, I know people love to hate Colleen Hoover, but I think that she's a really great writer. And basically, I feel like the reason why this book is kind of very much hated is because of the way that it's marketed. It's not a romance novel. I would consider this book an emotional drama. And then also around the same time that I was reading these 2 books, I was also listening to my first audiobook, because the audiobook I decided to listen to, and also again, it was the first audiobook that I read in my whole life. I don't actually particularly love audiobooks, because I'm not that type of person that can just sit down and like pop headphones in and just listen to a book. I need the visual book in front of me. I mean, it would be nice to have that kind of time, but I kind of don't. So I mostly like was listening or reading to this book at the same time that I was reading It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us. And the book that I'm talking about, I'll bring it up really quick on Audible so I can talk about these books at the same time, as I was also listening to this book at the same time that I was reading these 2 books. So, let me just bring it up really quick. Audible. Where is Audible? Right here. So, the book that I listened to, can I click this? The F. Hold on. And also, I don't know how the credits work on Audible. It says I have 1 credit, but I'm like, how am I supposed to use it? Because I actually really want to use it to listen to The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I really would like to listen to that audiobook next. The Honey. Okay, so the next book I was reading in the same time that I was reading those 2 books was the sequel to The Unhoneymooners, called The Honeymoon Crashers. And the reason why I listened to the audiobook was because it actually is only available in audiobook form. There's no actual physical copy. So, I finally decided to listen to my first audiobook, and I did really enjoy it. So with It Starts With Us and It Ends With Us, I wanted to read these books because, one, I wanted to get into something other than romance, but also I did want to read these books because they did interest me. And for these books to be classified as romance novels is just flat out wrong. I hate when people say that this is a romance series because there are two books. It's not a romance. I would consider these an emotional drama. And basically, it's about an abusive relationship. It's about this woman falling in love with someone who is abusive to her. And then the second book is the love story that she has with the person that she ends up being with, because obviously she can't stay with her abuser. And that's basically what these two books are about. I really enjoyed both of them. I thought they were both so good. But I think I would give both of these books, I think, a 4 out of 5 for both of them. I really did enjoy her storytelling, the way that she wrote these. I don't think there's anything wrong with the way that she wrote both of these books. I think that she, it's a very sensitive subject, obviously, but she wrote It Ends With Us based on her parents' relationship. So that's like already hard in itself for the person that had to watch her parents go through this growing up to write about it. She said it was the hardest book that she ever wrote. And then It Starts With Us is kind of like, it's not really based on her parents. It's based on Lily being happy with the person that she's supposed to be with. So I would give them both 4 out of 5 stars though, because, well, maybe a 4.25 out of 5 is what I would give both of them. And the only reason why I'm not giving them 5 out of 5 stars is just because, I did end up crying in both of them too, because there was some parts where the abuse was happening, especially like some childhood neglectment that really like upset me, especially in the first book. Like, it's upsetting what happens to her mother, but it's even worse when her father, makes his daughter or her, best friend think that they have to be afraid of him too. That was just awful to read, and it was just so upsetting. So I did cry in some parts of these books, because they're not easy to read. So I don't know. I don't think I'm going to read any of her other books though, because none of the other concepts like really interest me. These were really the only two that I was interested in reading. But I'm glad that I did, because I thought they were both incredibly written. And I think she's a great author. And I did read a lot of female authors this year. I only read 2 male authors. And now I'm fully immersed in a female written series that I will talk about at the end of this. So the only reason why I'm rating them 4.25 is because there was just some parts that I felt like were a little bit dragged out with like the letters that she writes to Ellen DeGeneres. But basically, like, for someone that's being abused as a child, they turn to like some kind of like foreign comfort, and her comfort was Ellen DeGeneres. Like, everybody needs some type of escapism when these traumatic experiences happen to somebody. It's almost a way of like detaching from the situation, or it pretty much is, because like everybody needs to be happy in some sort of way, and her happiness was watching the Ellen DeGeneres show. But I just feel like she went on a little bit too long when she was talking about it, but at the same time, it was really necessary to find out what happened to her as a child. But I just think they were a little bit long. But that would be my only complaint. Other than that, I thought they were both great books. Okay. Next up, I decided to finally get into a thriller book, because I actually really did want to read a thriller book at some point. Besides fantasy and romance, thriller is definitely my other favorite genre, or something that I really wanted to get into, because I actually have never read a thriller book before. So the first thriller I decided to start with is a Riley Sager novel. And before I get into him, the reason why I decided to start with one of his novels is because he's a New York Times bestseller of 7 books, I believe. Like, basically every book he comes out with is a #1 New York Times bestseller. So I'm like, you know what? I kind of really want to read one of his books. But this one was not a bestseller yet because this was his most recent book that he came out with. And this was the first book I decided to start with because this is actually his highest rated book on Goodreads, but it's also considered like his best book in general. That everybody's like, after reading some of his other books, they thought that this was the best one by far. So I'm glad that I decided to start with this one because I was blown away by this book too. And the first Riley Sager book I decided to read was The Only One Left. This book was fan-fucking-tastic. I absolutely ate up every moment of this book. He is such a brilliant writer. And I find for me that I think that I enjoy male writing just a little bit more, but not after the series that I'm reading now. I mean, there's some incredible female writers, but I kind of just like the way that males write just a little bit more. That's not being sexist. That's just my opinion. That's my opinion. But I fell in love with this book. This book is a ride, you guys. Like, I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I read this book, but I ate up every single moment. I cannot even describe what this book was actually about. Basically, it's about a woman that, what is her name? I'll just read the synopsis really quick. At 17, Lenora Hope hung her sister with a rope. Now reduced to a schoolyard chant, the Hope family murders shocked the Maine coast on one bloody night in 1929. While most people assumed 17-year-old Lenora was responsible, the police were never able to prove it. Other than her denial after the killings, she has never spoken publicly about that night, nor has she set foot outside of Hope's End, the cliffside mansion where the massacre occurred. It is now 1983, and home health aide Kit McDeary arrives at a decaying Hope's End to care for Lenora after her previous nurse fled in the middle of the night. In her 70s and confined to a wheelchair, Lenora was rendered mute by a series of strokes and can only communicate with Kit by tapping out sentences on an old typewriter. One night, Lenora uses it to make a tantalizing offer: "I want to tell you everything." As Kit helps Lenora write about the events leading to the Hope family massacre, it becomes clear there's more to this tale than people know. But when new details about her predecessor's departure come to light, Kit starts to suspect Lenora might not be telling the complete truth, and that the seemingly harmless woman in her care could be far more dangerous than she first thought. This book was mind-blowing. I can't even describe how many twists and turns that are in this book. At one point, I had to put the book down and had to unconfuse myself, because at one point I was like, the fuck? I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then I kind of pieced it together and I was like, holy shit. Like, that's mind-blowing. So I can't really describe anything else about this book without actually telling you to read this. But besides the Radleys, this is the other book I would highly, highly recommend reading. I was in love with this book, so definitely a solid 5 out of 5 stars for me. This book was fantastic. I loved it so much. There is so much more to this story than what's in the synopsis. You are in for a ride. It was so, so good. And I feel like this would make such a great movie as well. Oh my God, I loved this book. Even after I read it, I was like, I can't believe I can't ever experience this for the first time again. I'm kind of upset about it because I was like, that blew my mind. So yeah, I loved it so much, and yeah, just incredible. And I shed some tears in that book because there's some really upsetting parts towards the end, and it even made me cry talking about it again, because some of the things that happens to Kit is so upsetting. Like, really, really upsetting. Like, you have no idea until you read this book how upsetting some of the parts were, especially like, like 2/3 into the book is where everything starts getting revealed. And once you think that you figured out what happened, he kind of just throws you another curveball that it's like, nope, fuck what you thought. This is what really happened. It's basically how you feel when you're reading it. And I was like, what? I'm like, this is crazy. And I was like, but it was so incredibly good. I loved it so much. Okay, so after I read that, oh, and also, you think that, like, something supernatural is gonna happen, but the way that he, like, builds it up to think that it's some supernatural force when it actually wasn't is so good, because I got chills reading some parts, and I actually legitimately got a little bit creeped out reading it at night. I was like, I wasn't scared like going to sleep. Like, it wasn't something that I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared that I can't go to sleep. Like, I was able to read it at night, but there was some parts that I was like creeped out that, kind of just gave me a little bit of a creepy feeling. I was like, is someone gonna kill me tonight? Like, that's how I felt reading this book, but not like to the point where I was like terrified to go to sleep. Like, that's why I like thrillers more so than like straight up horror. I'm not a horror reader, but give me a good thriller and I will eat it up. So that book was just fantastic. I loved it so much. Okay, so then after I read that book, I was like, let me take a break from a thriller. Even though I kind of wanted to read more thrillers, I'm like, I think I need to take a break from one. So I decided to pick up another romance novel because, like I said, I feel like a romance novel is kind of more of a comfort for me. But again, that book was incredible. Shed some tears. It was so sad. So sad in some parts. And it actually ends up ending on a high note. But the way that it ends is just friggin' mind-blowing. I could not stop raving about that book. I could talk about that book for forever, but again, there's just so much that happens in it. It's just crazy. So the next book I decided to read was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. So the reason why I decided to read this one is because, and also most of the books that I did pick up were available at Target, because Target sells books for a pretty good price. They have a great book section, so I wanted to pick up as many books as I possibly could from Target. And I was like, let me pick up this one because this one kept on catching my attention. And also, excuse me. Sorry, I had to get a cough drop because I don't know what was happening. I don't remember if I reblended this, but I actually don't really care that much. I'm just gonna redo some of the outer corners. So this book is basically about a girl that works for a magazine, and basically she doesn't really want to invest herself in romance. Basically, like, this book and the other book by Ashley Poston is basically like the main characters are kind of similar to each other because they believe that they're not really destined to fall in love, but she's such a good, like, multi-layered writer that she gives the characters like so much depth and good story. And basically she's a magazine writer that goes to visit her aunt a lot, and her aunt is believed to live in a magical apartment, and basically the apartment will take you back 7 years back in time to meet like the past people that used to live in the apartment, which I thought was such a cool concept. And also, like, I wanted to take my dive into fantasy romance. Like, Fourth Wing is kind of more so like fantasy smut, because some of the scenes, that's probably the most spicy books that I read was Fourth Wing. They were pretty spicy. But this book is really, honestly, Ashley Poston is not really as much as a spicy writer as more so as just like a love storyteller. Like, and honestly, in both of her books, because I ended up reading her other book as well, and I'll talk about that in a minute, she is more so of a love story writer, but she's just such an incredible writer. And basically, so the main character ends up meeting this man 7 years in the past, and he turns out that he wants to become a chef. And, you know, the thing about the apartment is that you don't know when you're going to end up walking into the past. Like, once you leave the apartment, you can't see them again until the time slip decides for you to go back in time again when you come back to the apartment. So once she leaves to go to work, if she comes back, he could be there or he couldn't be there. And basically, her aunt was her most important person in her life, that her aunt ends up passing away, and she ends up moving into her aunt's apartment. And then like all these unusual things happen to her, and then he disappears one day because the apartment's like, well, you can't stay in this forever. That she spends her time in the present trying to find him in the present to see if she can find him and see if he remembers what happened in the past and see if he remembers her. And it was such a beautiful story. I would rate this a 4.5 out of 5, and the only reason why I'm rating it a 4.5, I mean, it was incredible. I ate up every moment. I thought it was such a cute book. This was just such a cute story. I loved it. And I was just, oh, it was just so good. But the only thing is that I kind of wish that she would have explained just a little bit more how this time slip was possible. Like, there's like a slip in time, and that's the only way you're able to access, you know, the past. That's the only thing I wish that she would have touched on, but everything else about it was absolutely lovely, and I would highly recommend this as a romance novel. Because again, I wanted to go into a little bit more of a fantasy romance, because the other two books that I read from Christina Loren are very much just reality kind of romance. Like any of that could happen to anybody. And that's why I like Christina Loren so much, is because they like really write relatable stories. Okay, so we have 4 more books to talk about. The next one is probably my least favorite book that I read, but I picked this one up at the same time as I read The 7-Year Slip. Because like I said, I still wanted to read another thriller, and I also wanted to read another Riley Sager book, and this was the only other book that I had, that they had at Target, that I could just easily pick up there from Riley Sager. And the book I'm talking about is The House Across the Lake. Now, this book is very, very controversial, and a lot of people don't really like this book. I would say I probably enjoyed it more so than others did, but it's not, this is probably my least favorite book that I read out of all of the books that I did read, but all the books I read, I pretty much loved. This book, I don't regret reading it, but I don't, after reading The Only One Left and being mind blown by how good that book was, this book was just, it was a little bit disappointing. And basically, this book takes place at a lake house, and there are several disappearances of young women happening, and basically the whole book you try to find out like who murdered these girls or who made these girls disappear. Like, they've never been found. Like, you don't know if they were murdered, which everybody pretty much assumed that they were murdered. And basically, the main character, a lot of these books' protagonists are mostly female, from what I've read. Mostly every single main character has been female, but also they're like females that love books. This is what most of these female protagonists are, which there's no problem with that. I just find that that's what a lot of the main characters have loved, have been books and female, but that's really okay. And basically she is an alcoholic. She grew up in a struggling childhood because her mother always wanted her to be like an actress, but also her mother was an actress, but she didn't want her daughter to outshine her. So basically she grew up having like a bunch of drug problems, like and then she turned to being an alcoholic, and her mom decides to send her to the lake house where she used to live with her ex-husband to see if she can, get away from society, because she keeps on embarrassing herself in society because she's not an unknown actress. She's like one of those actresses that's like, oh yeah, I know her from this movie. Like, she would always play like the supporting actress pretty much. She was never like the main character, but she was still like a well-known person. And the mother sends her to the lake house to think that this will help her get clean and not be an alcoholic anymore. But then there's a whole bunch of reasons on why she is an alcoholic, and a lot of things unfold in this book. But the reason why I feel like people were like, this book is kind of silly, is because there is a supernatural aspect to this book. Not like The Only One Left. The Only One Left was actually not supernatural when the murders were committed, and there weren't actually ghosts in the house, but he makes you believe that there are ghosts in the house, that you're like, are they all getting fucked with by a ghost? But then they're not, and then you find out it's one of the characters in the book. And that's what makes it so mind-blowing, is that he gives you that feeling, but then it's like, no, it's really not. But this one has like a supernatural twist to it. But then also some of the things that the main character does in this book is kind of just unnecessary, because then you find out it's someone that was really close to her was the one that was committing the murders. So I would give this book a 3.75 out of 5. There's a lot more that happens in this book, but I'm not gonna like go into it too much. That's basically the premise of it. And she meets this famous woman that is the house across the lake. Let me just talk about that really quick, because obviously that's the title. And she lives with like her husband, and she's an ex-supermodel. And basically she watches across the lake with her binoculars on everything that happens in their house, because it's like so clear with like a bunch of windows. And there's like a fight that happens one night, and then the ex-supermodel ends up disappearing, and then the whole rest of the book she is trying to find out what happened to her and to see if the same person committed the murders. But she actually ends up knowing who it was the whole time. But she makes the reader believe that she doesn't know, and then 2/3 into the book, it's like, oh, it's this person that did it, and she knew who did it all along, but she's going to try and pin it on her husband. When then you find out that, like, that wasn't even what actually happened. So I feel like it kind of just dumbfounds the reader a little bit, and then you're like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. It wasn't as good as The Only One Left, but it was still so well written, and I love the way he writes his internal dialogue. He is incredible at it. I could eat up his internal dialogue and not even have dialogue. That's how good it is, and usually I'm the person that enjoys dialogue more because it's just shorter and faster to read. But also he goes on internal dialogue for like a whole chapter, and I could eat it up. And I actually did end up crying in this book because there is one part that's actually really sad. So that's why I was like not completely DNFing this, but also it was not my favorite. So I would give it a 3.75, which is the lowest rating that I gave any of these books. Okay, so then remember when I said I wanted to read more Matt Haig books? So I decided to order 2 books off of Amazon because Target only has The Midnight Library from Matt Haig. They don't really have any other books from him available there. So I decided to order this book, and this was the book that I really wanted to read next from him. And the next one I read was Matt Haig's How to Stop Time. If I could speak. Oh my god, I've been speaking for a while. And this book was really good. But I think that this book was not my absolute favorite from him, but I still thought it was really good. And basically the concept of this book is that basically there's like a whole society of people that can live for hundreds of years, and basically he, you know, spends this whole book like trying to find the reason why he should keep on living this long. Like, because, you know, he ends up falling in love with a woman in like the 1600s, and he was born in the 1600s. And basically now in like the present time, it goes from each chapter from like his present time to the past. And I really like books that do that. Like, it's basically similar to the way that God, I put on a lot of blush. That Love and Other Words was written, is that it flashes between the past and the present, and basically he's just trying to find a reason on why he should keep on living, because he's been alive for like 500 years. You know, at that point, like, you're not sure like what to do with your life. And like, I know people want immortality, like people don't want to die, like, you know, in life. But the only reason why he decides to live on is for his wife in the 1600s, because they have a child. And it's believed that his child has the same ability that he does, because, you know, he had a child with her. So she would have like some of his capability of living longer, but she actually can. But the wife was human, and obviously the wife passed away at one point. But he actually doesn't tell you at the end whether or not he ends up with the woman that he's interested in the present time. But basically the whole book is him searching to be reunited with his daughter. And the head of the society is basically, you pretty much find out or think that, or suspecting that he is lying to him about his daughter's whereabouts, just so he can get him to do things for him. And it was really good. I really liked it. I definitely highly enjoyed this book. I would probably give this one a 4.5 out of 5. Actually, I don't know. With this, I love his writing so much. It was just really good. And this is actually going to be a I think it's going to be a mini-series. I think a mini-series. And Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be the main character. And I am so excited for it. That's why I wanted to read this book next from Matt Haig. But definitely in 2024, I am hoping to read at least 1 or 2 more Matt Haig books, because I am absolutely obsessed with his writing. So I really enjoyed this book as well. Okay. Then next up was the other Ashley Poston book that I was mentioning. And the next one, and I also ordered this on Amazon as well, was The Dead Romantics. Oh my god. I freaking loved this book, you guys. Loved this book. It is just so much more than a love story. I cried my eyes out at some parts in this book, Because I'm like, oh, it's just going to be like a typical romance. It's not going to be like that deep. Oh my God. Like, I loved this book even more than The 7 Year Slip. Basically, this book is about a ghostwriter that is writing for this woman that actually passed away years ago, but she also can talk to ghosts as a ghostwriter. And basically, her father ends up passing away in this book. And she has to go back home to attend her father's funeral and basically has to be with her family. But the reason why she also hasn't went back to see her family in like 10 years. She ends up moving to New York City, like basically the same thing as 7 Year Slip. She lives in NYC. And also in 7 Year Slip, she makes references to Long Island, and it makes me so happy. That's why I loved that book so much more, is because, and I'm so glad I decided to read it, is because Long Island's my home. I've lived in Long Island my whole life, so I was just so happy when she mentioned Long Island, and the fact that Ashley Poston writes about New York so much just gives me all the warm fuzzies. It makes me so happy. So she has to go back and, attend her father's funeral, but also her book editor needs her to finish the book that she's writing by the next day. And basically, like, she hasn't been able to write any more of this book because she has written off love. She doesn't believe that she can fall in love again. She was absolutely heartbroken by the man that she was with before this, because he basically took her talking to ghosts and tried to take advantage of that story, and that's why they end up breaking up. But when she goes to her hometown, she ends up seeing the ghost of the book editor, and she thinks that he's dead. But as you go into more of the book, you see what happens. But the way that she tells their story, that's basically what happens in the book. I don't want to give away too much more without you reading this, but trust me, this book is so much more than a romance novel. It was such a beautiful story. And the way that she writes about her father at her father's funeral, like, you think that she's just gonna write about like her saying the eulogy, because you obviously knew that she was going to say the eulogy at the funeral, because his father always loved, her the most, because, I mean, not just to say like he was her favorite, but also because they were both able to talk to ghosts, and he just so happened to be like an undertaker. It's kind of similar to 6 Feet Under, but I'm like, I was almost teetering it was teetering on almost being the same story as 6 Feet Under, but I think that's also why I enjoyed this book so much, because I love that show. But the way that she writes about the father and the memories and the things that we remember about people as humans, and moving on from grief and loss, and moving on from losing someone important in our lives, was so beautifully written that I was just crying during the whole time. And then the other part that I was crying in was the part where you think that he's fading away to cross over to actually be dead and not be a ghost anymore. That made me cry too. So this was just such an incredible book. Solid 5 out of 5 stars for me. I was just in love with this book. I loved it so much. I ate this up so fast, and I read this right before Christmas. So then the last book I'm going to talk about, and then I'll do my lips and go. This was the last book that I read in 2023, and the last book that I read in December. Like I said, I read like 9 books in December, so I'm so proud of myself. But my mom got me the entire Throne of Glass series for Christmas. And the last book that I read was the prequel to the Throne of Glass series, which is Sarah J. Maas's The Assassin's Blade. And there is quite a lot of controversy on whether or not you should read this book first, or if you should read Throne of Glass. But I'm actually really happy that I decided to start with this book first. And I don't really want to give any spoilers away about this series. I just think that you should read it yourself. I'm just going to finish putting my lip gloss on. So yeah, the last book I read was The Assassin's Blade, and my mom got me the entire box series of the hardcovers of the Throne of Glass series for Christmas, and I was just so ecstatic. I was either going to get this series or the ACOTAR series, and I think the reason why my mom got me this series is just purely because it's more expensive, because it's like $150, and she probably didn't want me to spend that much on this series, because the ACOTAR series is $50 because it's only 5 books. But this is the series that I'm committing myself to in 2024. This is what I've been reading, but I'm actually really happy that I decided to start with the prequel first. In my experience of reading the 2 other books, because I'm now already on the 3rd book. I've already read the first 2, and I'm almost done with the 3rd book already. It's sitting on my nightstand right there. After reading Throne of Glass, after The Assassin's Blade, I'm actually really happy that I decided to start with Throne of Glass first, because I feel like, Assassin's Blade first, because I feel like starting with this one first, it really sets up the story for the main character. And basically the series is about an assassin, a female assassin, that, basically it's about her tales of how she becomes a better assassin in this book. Like, I don't really want to give too much away at all about this, but I am fully committed to this series, and this is the only thing that I'm reading so far in 2024. There are definitely some other books I want to read, but so far I'm absolutely enjoying this series so much. I'm so invested into it. I shed some tears earlier reading the 3rd book, because there was one part that was really devastating. But the first 2 books I've enjoyed so much. But this was the last book that I read in December. I think I finished this on December 31st exactly, or maybe December 30th. And I love it. I'm not going to rate this book, though. I'm going to rate the entire series once I'm done with it. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5, because I've rated all these books a 5 out of 5 so far on Goodreads, and I absolutely love them. I would highly, highly suggest this series if you're deciding to figure out, okay, I don't know why Siri went off, what you're deciding to read as a fantasy series. I would highly recommend any Sarah J. Maas. I really want to read the ACOTAR series after this. So right now I'm currently reading Crown of Midnight. This is the 3rd book in this series, and I'm up to page 257. So I'm eating this book up. I just started it like not even 2 days ago, and I'm almost finished with it. I'm fully intending to read more later, but I'm just absolutely eating it up. I've been loving it so far. So yeah, that's all the books that I read in 2023. I was so excited to film this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at CBW819 and check out my Poshmark at the same handle. And let me know what you're reading in 2024. What was your favorite book in 2023? I would love to know. Did you read any of these books? I'm so excited to be talking about more books, and I can't wait. And I probably will just say what I used in my everyday makeup lookbook, because obviously it'll be in there, but I did use the ColourPop 1111 palette. I just did a really simple look because I'm just going to get my nails done today. So I just went in with Good Thoughts in the crease. Then I darkened up the crease more with Lucky Babe, and then I used Empowered on the outer corners, and then for the lid I went in with Total Angel, and then on the inner corners I just went in with Manifested, and that's all I used from the palette. And then I just used the Angel Blush from ColourPop and ColourPop Seismic as my highlighter. This is the shade Claim It. And then I just used my NYX Bear With Me Tinted Moisturizer and my Maybelline Instant Age Rewind concealer, the ColourPop Lengthening Mascara, the Make Up Forever Brown Liner, and then I just went in with the Summer Fridays lip balm on my lips. And that's pretty much all I did. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. And I will continue reading throughout 2024. Oh, also follow me on Goodreads if you guys want to see what I'm currently reading, what's on my list. I'm definitely going to make a whole nother video on the books that I'm trying to read in 2024. But I'm just, you know, it's all here of all the books that I want to read in 2024. If I could scroll down. But I'm definitely going to go into those into a separate video or we'll be here forever. So yeah, bye. Okay, so I went through the whole video without saying what my actual top 5 books were. I said a couple, but these are in no particular order because there's no way I can rank these. So obviously I said The Radleys by Matt Haig. Loved that book. And I wanted to pick another author, but honestly, I think that these 2 books were 2 of my favorites this year. So the other one I'm going to say is The Midnight Library. I really did enjoy this book so much. And then the next one, of course, was Fourth Wing. I was absolutely in love with this series, so I had to give it to Fourth Wing. And then the other 2 really surprised me on how much I loved both of these, but obviously number 4 is going to be the only one left. You know how much I loved this book. I ate it up. I loved it so much. And then the last one has to be The Dead Romantics. I didn't think I was going to love this book as much as I actually did, but I was just so into this story and I absolutely loved it. There's nothing else I can really say other than that those were my 5 absolute favorite books this year. So yeah, bye. Okay, I know that this is a different day and I know this video is already pretty long, but I totally forgot to talk about my thoughts on The Honeymoon Crashers because I just went into all the other books that I read in December and forgot to go back to my first audiobook because I had never listened to an audiobook before and I really wanted to listen to the sequel of The Honeymooners and I thought it was really cute. I really liked it, but I didn't love it as much as the first one. I still really liked it, and I thought it was cute that it was in Audible, in an audiobook form. And I'm glad that I finally did decide to listen to my first audiobook. There's probably going to be like a couple of audiobooks that I would like to listen to in 2024, but I'm not going to exactly prioritize them because, like, there's a lot of things I can do when I'm getting ready for the day, like listen to an audiobook, which is mostly how I listened to it because I'm not one to just like sit down and listen to an audiobook. Like I need like the visual in front of me or I'm going to get pretty bored. So, I thought it was cute, but I didn't really think it was super necessary for the story. I mean, basically the second book takes place from her twin sister's perspective, and if her twin sister is going to end up being happy because their look like reverses in the Honeymooners because what is the sister's name? I cannot remember her name right now off the top of my head because I read it like almost 2 months ago. It didn't take me as long as I thought to get through it though. I think it only took me like 2 weeks because again, I didn't really listen to it unless I was getting ready. Can I just go to the frickin' book for sake? It says a perfectionist maid of honor and a carefree surfer bro best man team up to plan a wedding and end up finding a spark of their own in the first audio original from author duo Christina Loren. And then it says her name is Amy, and it says Amy is determined to break the Torres' family wedding curse. Her own disaster of a reception ended with all the guests getting food poisoning, and she left her cheating husband soon after. So basically, it's just about her story and whether or not she's going to have a happy ending, but at the same time, she's planning her sister's wedding in Maui. They go back to Maui, which is how her sister and Ethan end up being together because they go on the honeymoon that Amy and her now ex-husband was supposed to go on, but since they got food poisoning, they couldn't go, and then they ended up falling in love with each other. So it was cute. I would rate it probably a 4 out of 5. I still really liked it. I just didn't love it as much as the Unhoneymooners, but I'm glad I decided to read 3 Christina Loren books in 2023. I do want to read more of her books in the future. So yeah, that's it. Bye now. Finally, bye.